right, we're just waiting another couple of minutes here. See if we get any other people come online. Sue, have you heard if Robin is coming in person or signing on? You will call. Sue, checking to make sure you can person something. Not too bad. Yeah, good.
I can hear. I do not have a confirmation from Robin.
We do have quorums, so we will get moving into the meeting. So thanks, folks, for attending. This is the August meeting of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. My name is Tim Brownell. I'm the director of the Solid Waste Department. And I will I'll now go through the attendance for this meeting of our various SWAC members. So representing the Environmental Center, Lindsay Hardy, are you here? And you're muted. I see you online. There you are.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, and you are in place of Neil Baumstark, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
All right. Brent Bivey from City of Lapine, are you present?
Yep, I'm here.
Jackson Dumanche from City of Sisters.
Here.
Morning, Jackson. Luke Dines, citizen at large. John Nelson, City of Redmond. Good morning, John. Keith Caceres, citizen at large. Here. Cassie Lacey, City of Bend.
Here.
Erica Hitzma, Republic Services.
Here.
You prefer Lindbergh? Tim Shimke, citizen at large.
Here.
Erwin Sletman, Cascade Disposal. And Robin Bora, citizen at large.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yep, can hear you, Robin. Thank you. All right,
Okay.
we have quorum. Also here, Dwight Miller and Ryan Rudnick from Parametrics, who have been very involved in this process from the beginning. So the first thing we'd like to do is review and approve the July meeting minutes. Is there a motion? A motion by Erica.
I'll second.
Seconded by Cassie. We do have Rodney Bora had submitted an edit to the minutes. If you have them handy, it's on page 3 of the minutes under Robin Bora. Under his bullet points, it's the fourth bullet point down, and he asks that be revised to consider Horse Ridge visibility with road and mountain bike trails, mountain bike increased usage in the research nature area could impact sage grouse. We wanted it revised to mountain bikers have alternate sites if they don't like the view of the landfill. Some mountain bike trails are inappropriate placed on BLM research natural areas on top of the ridge. Any other edits or modifications?
Yeah. Thank you for reading that.
Yep.
I've somehow got in here twice. I don't know how to get rid of one of them.
Oh, you are an echoing, so you're okay, Rob.
Okay.
If no other comments, all in favor? acceptance? Opposed? All right, minutes approved. So property acquisition updates. So I'm gonna bring up the share this. I'll make sure you all can see. You all can see this okay?
Are you able
Yes.
to pull up the PowerPoint version?
Is that on the, sorry, the folks, let me stop the share. Let's see if it's on. That's PDF. That's PDF. Hold on. There it is. I've got it. You have it now?
Looks good, thank you.
So in terms of, property acquisition updates, we have met, since our last meeting. We did, or just before our previous meeting, we had met with, the owners of, Horse Ridge LLC. And they did indicate, as have all, that they have an interest in, continuing discussions, and seeing if we can seek agreement on the purchase of each one of the three sites that we're looking at. ODOT would be a, potentially a land swap or some other, form of agreement. They have a formal process for, moving forward with government to government, transactions. Horse Ridge LLC, has, provided, an offer, for the purchase, and that not only includes the aggregate mine property, but they have a number of adjacent, non-aggregate mine parcels that are, next to the county properties, as well as some of the other adjacent sites we'll show you later. And Hap Taylor and Sons, which is Knife River, we met with them after last meeting, and they were interested in moving forward with discussions about purchase of their property. We will have to figure out what that process looks like, with the inclusion of an appraisal and an appraiser, and how those would be formulated. That was good news that all three are interested. They are not significantly active at aggregate mines, so there is willingness to consider and move forward. The Dodds Road site, if you have been following our emails, the board, the COID board, the last Tuesday, elected to remove their site from consideration, so they are not interested in selling that property to the county or having it considered as a potential landfill site going forward. And then the Roth site, they continue to be very interested in the Roth owners in moving forward with land sale and with that site being considered moving forward. In terms of public outreach, we have mailed letters to all the property owners within 1 mile of the Horse Ridge site. We did that 2 weeks ago so that they're aware of this process, and we'll continue to do that if we do move forward with this site doing a full site assessment, site evaluation, if that's the direction that the SWAC wants us to go. We'll continue to do outreach to that group, and I believe at one point we'll expand it to 2 miles if we go further consideration. We sent email out to and a letter out to the BLM just to make them aware where we're at in the process. And if they have any thoughts or concerns about any of the new sites that we're considering, or if they think that there's any impacts on the issues that they're dealing with those properties. And we did send an email out to tribal representatives, Central Oregon Trail Alliance, the Regional Solutions Team, Central Oregon Conservation Network, as well as, Central Oregon Trail Alliance, so CODA. They've made comments, so we want to make sure that they're very aware of what we're looking at. And then we did receive a number of public comments and input, and we've provided that to all of you, and it's posted on our website for public review. Additionally, we did, we saw that there was a editorial board posting in the Bend Bulletin this morning about this process, so I provided a copy of that to those present, and we'll email that out to other members of the SWAC after this meeting, but you would be able to pull it up and see it on the Bend Bulletin page under their editorial comments. And it was just a good article about where we're at in the process, how the process is moving forward, and encouraging public to make comments if they are so interested. Okay. Yeah.
So as part of the public outreach, got a lot of comments, of course, and this does not include Dodds Road, which we really got a lot of comments about. And so, but in summary, for Roth East and Horse Ridge, this is not to oversimplify it, into these, but really just to kind of get an impression of generally what the comments came out in these different areas and by different organizations or types of organizations. And so, as you can see, it was, not full steam ahead necessarily for Horse Ridge, but generally, yellows, cautious about, from the conservation groups, strongly opposing it, Roth in that case, local residents, more local residents at Roth. So, higher opposition versus Horse Ridge, kind of awaiting input at Horse Ridge. Recreational users, kind of the same thing. Part of this also, and why we kind of have to caveat it a little bit in yellow, is that Horse Ridge has not been out there as long as Roth. I mean, Roth has been out there since the beginning, and so there's been a lot of comment already and continued comment on that site. And so that's kind of why you're seeing this also on Roth. The indigenous groups, again, concerns, particularly at a site like Roth not being developed, whereas Horse Ridge has been developed, so a lot of impact already at that site. ODFW, kind of same thing. They really kind of prefer Horse Ridge, or a Horse Ridge type site that's farther away from threatened endangered species and sage grouse. And then just the general public and other, critical of Roth East particularly. And again, this point of a disturbed site, and that's why Moon Pit was very high up on the list before as well, as a disturbed site, and so that's kind of what we're seeing here as well.
Does that kind of reflect the SWAC's
Yeah,
understanding?
kind of how
of
you're
comments you
feeling.
made?
Yeah,
That's some helpful.
yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
like that.
Okay, thanks.
I was curious how many residents were included in that 1 mile radius again?
That's a good question. I know we sent out somewhere between 30 and 40 letters, but there are several individuals who own multiple parcels out there.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of 21 unique owners.
21 unique,
And you haven't gotten any comments from them?
not yet.
Residents, there are 2.
Yeah, 2 actual households.
Oh,
Around
okay.
3 sites.
Yeah.
The difference between 1 mile and 10 is somewhat inconsequential because
Okay.
there's this kind of cluster of platted lots within a mile, but then within 2 miles, it's just BLM generally.
Yeah,
A lot of property owners, they're in trusts and they're out of county and potentially out of state, so they may be in PO boxes, so we're waiting.
Yeah.
We expect to hear from some of them.
But those are just undeveloped parcels for the most part?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
So, we just added some representative comments, not to say that these are, the comments, but just to kind of give a sense of it, that from the different organizations as well as people, and how they felt about the site. A lot about safe grounds, the wildlife issues from ONDA as well as ODFW. And then, some personal feelings, from residents about and landowners about the sites out at Roth and preferring, a site that's not near them necessarily. And then, so really, it just really is kind of reinforcing generally what we're seeing in all their comments in these representative comments. And I think probably one of the things that we'll see how much comments we get out, and that is on kind of the mountain biking community and what you hear from them. Obviously, a lot of those are social trails out there that they go on to land that's not theirs. And so it'll be interesting to see when there are comments that come out through that.
And one thing I would add is the comment you don't see here, but will be discussed later in the presentation is around Opinion J and that comment that came from the SWAC at the end of last week meeting.
Right.
But we haven't received any written comments relative to that.
Right, yeah, this is the representative comments that were submitted in writing.
Yeah.
Many comments, certainly. All right, so there's some additional site screening information that we have prepared for the SWAC in response to some questions that were raised in the last meeting. Those include additional information on the Pinyon Jay habitat locations and the species sensitivity to development. Also, there were questions about zoning overlays along Pine Mountain Road, so we'll clarify some of that. There were questions about comparative cost estimates to try to get an idea of where Horse Ridge might land in comparison to Horse Ridge and Roth East. And also mitigation cost details, options, and estimates, a little more information there. So first up, our biologist, Colton Hero, will touch on Pinyon Jay information that we've gathered in coordination with various groups. You on, Colton? I see a raised hand. There we go. Like I can unmute you or report. Okay, are you on?
Hey there, can everyone hear me?
Yep, yes.
Fantastic. Yeah. Pinyon jays, as their namesake goes, are most commonly associated with pinyon pines, but are also found within juniper and ponderosa pine woodlands where they forage, cache seeds, and also breed. They are highly dependent upon healthy stands of these habitats, and they nest in colonies, which vary from 50 to 60 nests. They generally have high nest fidelity, where they'll continually come back to the same nesting location. This map to the right is showing Pinyon Jay presence records and absence, presence being in red and absence being in teal, either both from public agencies as well as from citizen groups that record these observations. And so in general, you can somewhat see that there are no documented observations within Roth East or Moon Pit. However, since Moon Pit does have a fair amount of juniper, they would be expected to use that area. You can see that generally in location of Horse Ridge, that there are some documented presences within there. We were able to reach out to Larry Ashton at the Bureau of Land Management and Laurel Collins, who spoke previously at the last SWAC at the East Cascade Bird Alliance about the presence of Pinyon Jays within the vicinity of Horse Ridge, in particular whether there was a nesting colony of Pinyon Jays within the confines of the site itself. And overall, through those coordinations with both individuals, that there are no records of Pinyon Jays within the boundaries of Horse Ridge, but that the species likely uses the area. There have been frequent observations of the species within the vicinity of the site, ranging from about 10 to 40 birds of these flocks, which generally indicate that a nesting colony is present within the vicinity of Horse Ridge, but that overall it is not within the actual boundaries of the site itself. And so there is potential for when Horse Ridges get developed that there could be some impacts to that nesting colony itself. Ryan, you want to move to the next slide? And so following with that disturbance that they have a sensitivity to habitat removal, specifically removing of these their preferred habitat types, pinyon, juniper, ponderosa pine woodlands, that anything that alters the amount of tree cover or seed production can overall disrupt their foraging and nesting. And this is also to note that Pinyon Jays are also particularly vulnerable, like other birds, that they are particularly vulnerable to disturbance during their breeding season, which only goes from March 1st to May 30th, which can overall cause nest abandonment, which again, they have a high nest fidelity. And their overall conservation status and their overall positioning as far as federal protections, they've overall been declining within the Western states, generally due to the increased frequency of wildfire and droughts, invasive species spread, and adverse forest management. The map to your right generally shows where Pinyon Jay populations have been declining in red and where they have been generally increasing in blue. So you can see within Oregon, there has overall been a slight increase in population of late, but overall, as a species, the population has generally been declining. As far as their federal status, in 2023, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service determined that a petition to list the species as endangered under the Endangered Species Act may be warranted, which overall kind of starts this entire review of whether the species should be listed. And so first in that step is a species status review, where they collect information on the species and overall make a determination for how the population trend is going and whether it warrants to be listed or not. And then it is proposed. And that is all to say that it is a lengthy process and that is already off to a slow start as the species status review is getting delayed to 2028. And so that within recent time that there likely will not be a listing determination for the species, but that later in the future, the species may get listed.
Thank you, Colby. Any questions on that from SWAC?
I have a question. If, say you were to develop a landfill there and it was not listed as an endangered species, and then the landfill didn't operate for a year or two, and it were to get listed in like 2033 or something, does that affect like an existing landfill or does anybody know? That's kind of a general question about how the Endangered Species Act works.
No, that is a great question.
Out there, yeah.
Hi, Stephanie Marshall, Senior Assistant Legal Counsel for Deschutes County. That's a great question. Typically, new laws and regulations do not apply retroactively.
Yeah.
So when a statute or regulation is adopted, they will state if there's an intent to apply it retroactively. And there may be a time period within which the owner or operator has to come into compliance with the new rule. But generally speaking, they don't apply retroactively, but that would, have to be seen by what
They
is,
could.
yeah, what's adopted. Yeah, it could.
And
And
have
then,
you, have
yeah.
you heard of that with the Endangered Species Act?
I have not, but every administration, every, agency has different procedures that they follow. I think that it's highly unlikely that they would require retroactive application, but they may have milestones, where you've got to, come into compliance with this aspect of a regulation by a certain date and by another date.
Yeah,
But it's a really good question.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or like, if you need to do major improvements, like 10 years later, sometimes.
Oh, yeah, that
That's
could
when
be,
it
that could be
will.
impacted. Yeah,
Yeah.
any future development, even if it's an approved use, future
Yeah.
development will have to comply.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Colton, what are the primary causes of disturbance that would lead to abandonment? Would it be things like ravens and those types of birds, or is it more activity based?
I think it would be more activity and noise based. So there'd be the initial disturbance of their habitats. And then it would just be the constant sound and operations that may disturb nests within the area.
Any other questions on that?
Yeah, could I ask a question?
Sure.
Colton, what size juniper and density of juniper did you find when you reviewed the research on pinyon jays? Did it require mature forest or young forest or closed canopy or?
Not closed canopy, I would generally say mature forests that are able to produce seeds to be able to facilitate their foraging. But generally open canopy structure that is generally typical of pinyon pine forests and juniper woodlands.
Uh-huh. And you did find evidence that actual disturbance, physical disturbance from noise and traffic and all that affects them, not just habitat removal.
Yes, and that all depends on the proximity to that noise and operations. And so, in coordination with both the East Cascade Bird Alliance and Bureau of Land Management, they weren't able to identify where the nesting colony is present, just that there's likely one to be within the vicinity of the area. So that is all to say that it would depend upon the overall location of that given nest colony of whether the horse ridge, the site would have an impact on that colony itself, but it would alter habitat usage patterns.
Okay, looking at the map that's on the screen right now, I can see the Fish and Wildlife Service would certainly consider listing where the pinyon pine is in Wyoming, Colorado, et cetera, the red areas. The expanding population in Oregon may reflect just an expansion of juniper, beyond what was here naturally. And I would be surprised they would list this, but we should ask the Fish and Wildlife Service for their thoughts about pinyon pine, pinyon jay here versus the sage grouse at Roth East. And what their overall evaluations would be from an endangered species standpoint. And also, I guess it would mainly affect federal land listing unless the county was to use federal funding in the landfill, then it could affect that, but I'm not an expert on that point either, but that could be another question for the Fish and Wildlife Service. I think the local office here could probably help on this.
Thanks, Robin. Lindsay? You're on mute, Lindsay, if you're asking a question.
Thanks. Sorry, my computer is being slow. I was wondering when you mentioned the additional landowners all surrounding the site, if there are any opportunities for purchase of additional land for habitat mitigation or anything else to try to preserve some more habitat? Is that part of the conversation? Does that land even is that additional land like even part of the area that we're talking about that pinyon jays have been found?
I think if we do a final site analysis, we can get deeper into the, most of the land around it is BLM. And then, with the purchase of the, one of the landowners is offering up quite a bit of additional land. I think it's 40 acres of non-aggregate mine around there, but we'd have to really look at what the mitigation requirements and responsibilities would be. You may want to add to that.
Yeah, Colton, can you speak to what the mitigation requirements would be under the current framework for Pinyon Jays?
There are currently no mitigation obligations for Pinyon Jay. The species is not currently under federal protection. It is being reviewed. At this point is in the very early stages of whether the species should be considered protected under Endangered Species Act. So there is some unknowns of whether by the time in which the landfill would be constructed, of whether the species would be listed. And then there would be habitat research and overall understanding of where Pinyon Jay is on the landscape to be able to understand the mitigation. But currently, if we were to construct right now, there is no mitigation obligation.
So does the mitigation for the Pinyon Jay look very similar or very different from mitigation for the sage grouse? It's all pretty much the same approach to mitigation, protecting habitat or enhancing habitat, or, I mean, I'm just wondering if dealing with mitigation for Pinyon Jays is much more difficult than dealing with mitigation for the sage grouse, or vice versa.
Okay.
That's a good question. I would generally say it would be less burdensome than sage grouse. I think a lot of work went into preventing the listing of sage grouse federally and just managing it at the state level, which involved many laws and mitigation obligations in order to prevent their listing in the first place. Often when it comes to consultations with the Endangered Species Act and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, there are some mitigation obligations, but sometimes it comes down to conservation recommendations, which is mostly actions that will limit the amount of take and not actually going into acquisition of lands. However, this is generally moving into uncharted territory as the species, again, is not listed and there is not a track record for what is required for consulting on that species.
Just one quick note, and then we can jump to John. As you guys have seen on the roadmap to opening, if all goes according to plan, we'll be going through permitting 2026 through 2028 before species are here. Also considering Stephanie's comments about the timing and, you know, the applicability of these rules to development action. John, do you have a comment, question?
Yeah, mostly what I was wondering is the wildlife that kind of tends to follow landfills, do we have any information or any speculation as to what that interaction is going to look like with the Pinyon Jay? And or is that something that'll be kind of flushed out as we do our due diligence and kind of move forward?
Well, you have a thought on that?
That has not been something that we have intensively looked into, but we'll be able to flesh out as we move on forward.
Is it something that could potentially come back to bite us later if we don't, or is the intent we absolutely will?
I would say because it's been brought up as an issue of concern that it will be part of the, final site evaluation. We will have to look at this pretty deeply.
You know, and just to add, it's both for the process and development of a site, but it's also the operation of the site. So a lot of this will be rolled into facility operations, bird control, and, you know, both for, you know, for different types of birds. So that it will ripple throughout, you know, both the capital development of the site as well as operations.
Right, you're really disappointing, as I mentioned, that you go through permitting in 2026 through 2028, then all of a sudden it gets listed in 2028. After this location is selected, everything else is good, is after the whole project at that point. So that would be important to try to figure out for this site analysis process.
Yeah, that's a good point, Keith. And we can actually go through and kind of lay out that time frame. Because I think one of the points made is that the status review is not till 28.
And then it would be longer.
Which could be, you know, 5 years for the process of actual listing. And then where is it listed? And so.
And I'm assuming no further delays, which is also unlikely.
Yeah.
For even status review.
Yeah.
And even if it were to be listed, I think things that are in favor or supportive to the species is the population growth that's being seen in Oregon. For the graph that you're showing up there. It's declining in western states, but Oregon is above 1.5%. But, and also the prevalence of that habitat in that vicinity. So there's no shortage of that kind of habitat suitable for them, as far as we can see. Whereas with sage grouse, there's very specific habitat characteristics that when those areas are disrupted, you know, there's only certain habitats that work well for them. Whereas juniper woodland, a lot of that around this site.
And you have the advantage of that site's already been disturbed anyway, with my operations.
Right. So not that there's anything definitive there, just I think those kind of, those are factors.
Can we go back to the presentation?
Yeah, and we do want to give plenty of time for stock deliberation, so I'll try to fly through these, remaining slides. But please, let us know if you have questions, SWAC members. Let's see. I can see the screen, but I'm not controlling it. There we go. Okay, we're back. So there were questions about some of the Pine Mountain Road overlay zones. Robin had asked about the landscape management overlay zone. There in fact is an LM overlay zone that follows Pine Mountain Road up to presumably the peak of Pine Mountain near the observatory, and that is a 1/4 mile offset from the center line. So that's a 1/2 mile long, 1/2 mile wide swath that follows Pine Mountain Road and Highway 20. You can see that in the blue hatching. Only a small portion of the Rock Northeast site is subject to this, as you can see right here. And its limitations relating to structure and feature height and visual mitigation, those only apply in areas where development is proposed within the LM zone. And so Rock East is clear of it, Rock Northeast, this portion of the proposed disposal area would be subject to height limitations. So from our reading of this, that's the extent of the LM zone's impact on Rock East development. Pine Mountain Road, we also reached out to research US Forest Service land visual overlays for preservation of visual resources and visual standards, et cetera. And this area here, you can see the Ross site generally in red. And then the region just to the south of there on Forest Service land is designated as partial retention, which in the Forest Service visual quality objective system, that means management activities may be visible, but must remain visually subordinate to the natural landscape, and design goals emphasize blending alterations with the surrounding environment. But the point is that this is regulating US Forest Service activities on Forest Service land. Doesn't apply to private parcels that are adjacent to it. As you can see, these are grayed out. So yes, there are some overlays around Pine Mountain and along Pine Mountain Road that do impose some visual So some restrictions that aim to protect visual resources, but they don't appear to have any significant bearing on the rock sites, especially rock east. Any questions on that, Robin? Want to make sure we address that.
No, so the first part, was that BLM, the slide before? Or who's overlay? These are all Forest Service?
So green represents federal land, could be Forest Service, could be BLM. Generally, where you
Okay.
see pine trees, it's Forest Service, otherwise BLM, so yeah, up on Pine Mountain, that's Forest Service.
So the slide we're looking at now it would be BLM then direction, the overlay?
The overlay is county, right?
Yeah, this is the county overlay zone, landscape.
Oh, this is the
management.
county, I'm sorry, that's what I missed, okay,
There's kind of
it's a
two
county
zones.
overlay,
Yeah.
okay. And we don't know if
It's-
BLM has something like this, like the Forest Service.
They might, and it would apply to BLM lands, not private lands adjacent.
Yeah, this is all private, okay.
Okay, another question was, there were questions about some of the comparative high-level costs for the sites, and so we're bringing this back. We presented this a few months ago. So I'll go through it quickly, but this is the comparative cost factor analysis where we qualitatively evaluated these supplemental sites with respect to these different cost factors: excavation, waste hauling, road infrastructure, power and water infrastructure, and the weightings are based on the detailed estimates we did for Rockies and Moon Pit, where we found the real drivers of cost is primarily excavation, followed by waste hauling. Road, power, and water infrastructure are relatively minor components, in the ballpark of $1 million each, perhaps, related to each of those sites. But over the long haul, excavation is hundreds of millions, waste hauling as well. Hundreds of thousands per year. And so, those are the big things. And so those have been given more weight. So this is similar to the tables you've seen before, but we've eliminated the Dodds Road site, which is no longer viable, given the change in the COID's position. So we've emphasized Horse Ridge and Rockies and how they compare with these weightings. One represents a relatively lower cost, and then 5 a higher cost. So lower number qualitatively represents a lower estimated cost in these different areas. And so this bar chart, I think, does the best job of kind of showing how these different cost factors stack up to represent cost. Again, that doesn't mean that Rockies would be twice as expensive as Horse Ridge, but it just kind of helps to compare and to show what the costs for each site would consist of.
Sorry. Why is Horse Ridge so cheap? Like, my recollection from the Roth discussion was that it's just like really just like scoop it up, like I thought it was described as very easy to excavate, so I'm just curious why Horse Ridge is considered even less costly to excavate.
Oh, that's a good point. So let's look at the point here. So excavation costs. Horse Ridge, Rockies. So the factor here is that Horse Ridge has both alluvial deposits, which are just as easy to dig up. Rockies has hundreds of feet of that.
Yeah.
Horse Ridge has about 30 to 50 feet in the middle, which is as deep as the landfill needs to go. But it also has a hillside pocket, so to speak, to fill in, and so that's essentially free and available airspace.
Okay.
As well as area that's already excavated, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
in terms of diggability, Rockies is easy, to a greater depth. But Horse Ridge is easy digging to the depth that's necessary and has that free airspace,
Okay.
for filling it.
And then Moon Pit had the free airspace, but it was like rock, right? Excavated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it also was partially excavated, so that's why it was a little bit lower as well. Due to that.
That was a great question, though.
Yeah.
Haul costs, you can see that's a big differentiator between Horse Ridge and Rockies. And that actually led Rockies to become more or comparable to Moon Pit in life cycle costs around year 50, because the haul cost as a part of the operational cost annually caught up with Moon Pit because of the additional haul. That's a lower initial development cost, but the operation, you know, the haul cost brought it up. So
In mileage, how much further is Rockies and Rock Northeast versus Horse Ridge? 5 miles? You
And
got-
that's, it's like 14 miles.
Oh, 14 miles, that much
Yes.
further. Okay.
and so round
Pretty
trip.
different. Yeah, 28. Up the hill. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, this gives a sense of where it's expected to fall. Again, more detailed estimates would be prepared for final site evaluation, but this is what we know now. We took this a step further and took the cost estimates from the final site evaluation, Moon Pit and Roth East. And then, in the column to the right, we have a preliminary estimate at this point, based on what we know, of how Horse Ridge would compare to Moon Pit and Roth East. So initial site acquisition cost, you can see Moon Pit was around nearly 16 million, Roth East, roughly 5.5 million, for the whole deal, all the Roth holdings. Horse Ridge TBD, but based on where we're seeing things going, estimating it would fall between 6 and 10 million. Initial development cost, again, we haven't studied it enough to put a number down, but based on what we know, it's likely to be somewhere in between Moon Pit and Roth East, based on the available infrastructure on site, and whatnot. Still development cost per acre. Here you can see how that excavation cost is really such a huge driver. It's nearly twice as much as Moon Pit due to the rock excavation. And that scales over time and by area, so. It's expected to be similar to Roth, again, due to favorable soils and topography, which also provides some free airspace. Operational cost, this is expected to be similar to Moon Pit due to the similar haul distance. That's one of the main factors in the operational cost is the haul cost. And so given that it's nearly the same commute as Moon Pit, we expect it to be closer to Moon Pit's operation cost. And the haul cost is, you know, broken out here as a component of the operational cost. There, so you can see the difference. Roughly 800,000 per year. And for the same reason. And so because it has kind of the best of both worlds per se, in terms of, acquisition, that would fall in the middle, but development costs lower like Roth, and operational costs lower like Moon Pit. The preliminary expectation is that it has the potential to be lower than both the Moon Pit and Roth sites on a cost per ton over the lifespan, which really this, I think, is the best number to look at, because that is the cost of both capital projects and operational costs per ton over 100 years. So that's the big picture. But key to note, Horse Ridge costs would be fully estimated with the final site evaluation. This is just a preliminary prediction, so to speak. Any questions on that cost comparison?
Yeah, I have one. Could you repeat again why Moon Pit excavation and cell development is that much more expensive given, the hole's already there? I know you said that, but I didn't follow exactly.
Yeah, there's a portion of it that the hole is already there. That's only, that's less than a third. It's probably a quarter of the site. The rest of the site would have to be excavated. And it's all rock.
Oh, okay,
So it's a pretty expensive process,
okay,
depending on whether there's value for that rock or not to offset it. So that's why you actually see in the Moon Pit that you have a variable cost per ton. That's really conditional upon receiving value for all that rock that's excavated, which is an expensive process.
all right, thank you.
Right, make sure the cost per ton counts for all expenses tied in operational.
Yeah, but there is the first 30 years when we're paying off the bonds that will be issued for the development of the site. it would be significantly higher than that, $43 or $45, might be closer to 60, 65. But over the lifespan,
It would reduce.
it would, yeah.
So for that, we total up the development and the operational costs of 100 years, which comes around $2 billion. In, today's dollars.
Sure.
Divided by the total tonnage disposed.
Got it.
So that's the full average cost.
And remind me, Horse Ridge is 100-year, not 80-year, right?
Yeah, it's closer to, I think, 130 years.
In terms of its ultimate capacity, and that was, for our capacity study, we took the full extent of the site, which shows what it could be developed to. We'll have to likely carve some of that down to fit in some of the landfill supporting facilities like the office, the maintenance building, stockpile areas, water facilities, et cetera. The promising thing is that it's likely that 100 years or near 100 years could be achieved. And that's something we do in the next phase of a final site evaluation is a master plan that shows all those other facilities and a finer point on what the capacity is fitting everything in. Ready to move on? There was also a question about here we go. The mitigation costs and some of the details there. I'll fly through this fairly quickly because we saw this last month. So with Horse Ridge, the in lieu fee estimate was $650,000 for sage grouse impacts. There's also additional mitigation required for big game. But you can see the scale, the in lieu fee estimate and the functional acres impact give a sense of the scale of sage grouse impact. With Roth East, it's nearly 10 times that in terms of both functional acres impacted and the in lieu fee estimate. Some of the options presented in the final site evaluation for Roth East include, on-site mitigation, as you can see, those enhancement actions, juniper removal, grazing restrictions, et cetera. Acquisition and mitigation, and how many acres that includes, the cost to purchase that property, the enhancement costs, and the O&M. You can see where the totals land. Also conservation agreements with landowners. We kind of have a toolbox for satisfying these statutory mitigation requirements. And then the last option, which is kind of the easy button, so to speak, higher cost, but the in lieu fee, which is set 7.6 million. So what we've estimated or provided here with respect to sage grouse is this range of 871 at the lowest cost, but maybe higher activity option, or more creative perhaps, 871 to 7.6. You can see that the low and the high reflected there in the options. So that's that explains the breadth of mitigation cost that is expected for Roth East. Again, this level of study would be undertaken for Horse Ridge if the SWAC directs that. But as you may remember, in April of 2024, the SWAC, while recommending the Moonpit site, also included a recommendation that the county work with stakeholders to develop and implement a robust and comprehensive mitigation strategy that reflects community values, minimize impacts to area wildlife and recreation. And so the reason we're bringing this back up is that while there may be more cost-effective options, ways to save money, so to speak, on mitigation requirements, less than the in lieu fee estimate, this directive has the potential to drive up mitigation costs well beyond the in lieu fee estimate. Largely because, there is a fair bit of ambiguity in the word robust. And so, that's a part of the picture for mitigation. If the county is expected to develop a robust and comprehensive mitigation strategy, who knows where that cost could land? Anything else you'd like to
There's a
share?
really large delta between 871 and 7.6 million.
Yeah.
That's huge. So not knowing that just might not be able to clean that up more.
Yeah, and I think that in the modeling, we would use the higher number and, we may include within this just a continuous funding mechanism to continue to do contemporary mitigation around the site and improvements to look at that as part of our discussions with impact.
Sure thing.
Yeah.
All right, well, any further questions on the mitigation options estimate? All right. Time for public comment. Thinner crowd this month.
So we can see if we,
The chat or the.
participants. So if there's anybody in the public who has a comment.
Well, you've got me again.
All right.
There's the list.
Okay, thank you. So Steve Pear, coming up to speak about the Rock East site.
As y'all know, I've been a strong advocate for Roth East because I live out there. And I understand what's there. I would oppose strenuously parametrics index of 2 on the excavation of Roth East. I would offer you could take every kindergarten class in Central Oregon, give them the old Tonka toys and send them out there and they can dig a pit with those Tonka toys. So I would say the excavation ought to be 0 instead of 2. I mean, anyhow, okay, that's enough said. Is it possible to bring back your first slide where we had all the red bang, 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 bang? Yeah, when I saw that, it was kind of like, wait a minute, folks. Okay. Conservation organizations, I get that, but I go back to the fact that I don't see any mule deer. I occasionally see antelope. The sage grouse are all over to the west at the Bradovich Well at the pond that Dave always likes to fill with water. Sage grouse love water. Wherever you have water, you're gonna have your sage grouse. Local residents, there are 3. Phil and Lee at Bradovich Well, nice old people. I'd hate to negatively impact them. Myself, I'm one of them. I'm probably gonna have to move. The other guy over to the east, Doug McGee, couldn't happen to a nicer guy. So anyhow, recreational users, hang gliders, they're never east of the Pine Mountain Road. God's pillar of fire with a methane plume does not exist negatively for the hang gliders people. Indigenous groups, I respect Native Americans and maybe there's an old village out there. Who knows? I've kind of noodled around out there a lot, haven't found anything. ODF and W, the mitigation, when we go way back to a year ago, I don't remember that number being $7 million. And I'd have to look back on my notes. Anyhow, as I told Ryan earlier, mitigation wise, we've got 3,500 acres that the county could allocate the site to be $400,000. And then all the rest is the bribe to ODF and W for the mitigation. So, and the general public does not have a clue. They really don't. The public that comes in and out of there are going so fast on the Pine Mountain Road, 80 miles, well, 50 miles an hour. I was fixing fence yesterday, almost got run over. So, yeah. That's my story. Thank you very much. It's been a great ride.
Sue, are there any public comments, raised hands on public?
No raised hands.
Yeah, so quick to the next slide. So yeah, now we're at point of how does the SWAC want to move forward? So any thoughts, questions, ideas on what you think are the long pathways forward? The one thing I want to comment on is that during this meeting, we received a email from the owner or ownership of Moon Pit, and they have formally requested to remove themselves from any further consideration. Interesting. So I came in at 9:19 this morning.
Well,
Sorry, can you-
okay.
Reduce the symbol by the final thing. Yeah, shot for it.
Yeah. So. I think it was helpful in the presentation that it gives us kind of a comparative assessment of relative to what we have, but yeah, now we receive.
I appreciate all the analysis and all the work that went into this, because I think it really helps us be more educated and we look through this process. So thank you, Brian, and everyone involved.
I have a question. There is some analysis yet to be done on the Horse Ridge site that has already been completed on Roth East and Moon Pit, right? So in order to get them up to level, there's some work to do there. Going forward from that point where they're all equal, what's next to do as far as site investigation, due diligence, whatever?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll start and then, from a staff perspective, if you were, if the SWAC was to recommend moving forward for a final site evaluation of Horse Ridge, that would then get the information up to the same level as Roth East. So then we would have that opportunity for comparison. I think what staff and parametrics would also do in the meantime is to work with all of the property owners to get into tentative agreement or agreement on what a purchase agreement would look like, and that we have some level of surety that they would be willing to move forward, so that we wouldn't be in the position we were last time. So during that 4 to 6 month period that we would be doing that final site evaluation, we would, the staff and county staff, legal, property management, would be working with the owners of those sites to do appraisals and get the agreements in a position that would be available for the SWAC as well as the Board of County Commissioners as we move forward.
Would there be any additional public outreach efforts that would be made as part of that process?
Yeah, I think, we know that Central Oregon Trail Alliance would have some thoughts, as well as what Audubon Society is now called the
East Cascade
Bird Alliance. So we'd be doing outreach to them, ODF and W. But yes, we would also reach out to neighbors and expand it out to a 2 mile radius. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very small.
John or Brent, feel free to unmute.
Yeah, Brett.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I didn't know if you were talking to John or I. So yeah, I want to thank the public commenter for providing comment. I can certainly understand a lot of those viewpoints. I'm leaning towards the Horse Ridge site, obviously based on the data, but mostly, an experience with, especially energy facility siting on lands and the challenges you face with ODF and W. Granted, a lot of the wildlife standards tend to be subjective. and goalposts tend to move quite a bit. That'd be a definite battle for the county that I don't know if we'd be wanting to take that on with a project like this, because it would, especially with sage grouse, it would just end up being a legal battle in the end. Granted, there's a lot of other opposition as well to the project, but yeah, I leaning towards the Horse Ridge site. Data's pointing in that direction, and I think it's clear. That's all I got.
Yeah, thank you. And John?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I woke up this morning, we had 4 sites and now we're down to 2. So I definitely support moving forward with the due diligence and the review on the Horse Ridge. I am a little bit concerned that kind of losing a number of sites may alter the price point at which we can acquire that land. But I still think it's worth looking at. And I also wanted to thank Parametrics and Tim for taking some time to meet with me offline and bringing me up to speed and kind of answering all my questions as kind of a late arrival to the SWAC. It meant a lot and it really helped me about that. So I just wanted to thank you guys for that as well.
Robin?
Yeah, first of all, Tim, just to clarify, I heard correctly. You said that Moon Pit is now off, no longer under consideration.
Yeah, we received that and it was sent to the Board of County Commissioners this morning that they wanted to be removed from any further consideration.
Okay, and so the main decision you're looking for from the committee is whether or not to move Horse Ridge to final evaluation, so it's at the same level as Roth East in terms of the information we have. Is that correct?
Either that, or you could just move forward with Roth East as a recommendation to the board.
Okay.
That's
and are we eliminating Roth Northeast? That there's no clear reason to keep that in the running?
We could do an evaluation of that. I think, the staff and Parametrics can speak to this as well. That one is quite visible from the highway. It has much lower capacity. That's probably an 80-year site at that location. And it's got all the same mitigation requirements that we would have from the other the other Roth site. So from a staff perspective, we don't see it as a significant alternative, but that's for the SWAC.
Okay, it seems like also that ODFW section 140 or whatever that was mentioned, and I missed if it was discussed in this meeting again, but we have to consider an alternative to Roth East because of the sage grouse. To see if there's a viable alternative out there. And sure, at this point, it appears Horse Ridge is viable. So I don't see how we have any choice but to not proceed with, a full site evaluation of Horse Ridge. And I don't know if the committee's done with discussion, but I would be, happy to make a motion to proceed with the full site evaluation of Horse Ridge. So it's at the same level of consideration as Roth East and to take Roth Northeast off the table.
I did hear that as a motion, so is there a second?
I would second that.
And we're now in discussion on that motion and we can also, if people have thoughts on other approaches, we can always table it, but you do have a motion to discuss.
I would support Robin's motion. And yeah, just to kind of speak to some of his points within the ORS statute or OAR statute that he was citing, the term alternative sites, and when they say, something that's financially attainable, a lot of that is really subjective. If you only have one site that where a landowner is willing to sell, does that mean privately owned sites have to be considered? So yeah, again, sorry, I'm just kind of on my soapbox here, but I'll voice support with Robin's motion.
Just before we go into that, one quick question, because we've kind of got two parts to that. One is to elevate Horse Ridge, and then the other one is sounds like to remove Roth East. So are we comfortable with both of those items in a single motion, or should that be separate?
It was remove Rock Northeast, not Rock East. I'm
Sorry, yeah,
comfortable with keeping that in one motion, but I would be comfortable separating them too.
One thing just on the, if I can speak, and it's just from a technical perspective. By moving Horse Ridge forward and not advancing Rock East, Northeast, it more or less is kind of left in the dust. And it's not brought up to a level of study where it would be available for development and permitting and development, right? Northeast, right, Northeast. So it more or less that would be an effect of advancing Horse Ridge and not Rock Northeast. Does that make sense?
Sure. But it sounds like Rock Northeast has similar concerns that Roth East has, and it's more exposure to the highway and just visibility. And so to me, I don't see it being as viable as moving forward with Horse Ridge.
Any other discussion? All right,
For the record, can we clarify who made the first and second? I have Robin as the first, and who was the second?
Keith Caceres, I seconded.
Thank you.
Sure.
well, with that, no further discussion, all in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So Sue, that was unanimous with all members, voting in favor to move forward with final site evaluation of the Horse Ridge site and removal of the Roth Northeast site. So with that, what would happen is we'll get into the full site evaluation. I don't believe that we'll have a meeting, an interim meeting until we start to get some preliminary reports or final results. So we will, for the committee, we'll look to set some dates, and we'll reach out to you all to make sure that those are dates that will work for you all, that we can start to bring back results. At that point, that would then be come to the SWAC to make recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners.
Do you expect that to be before the end of the year, probably in the winter?
Yeah, you want to pull up the timeline?
Targeting spring 2026, so that gives us roughly 6 months of study to go geotechnical work, archaeological, biological, et cetera. And then come back with results in the spring. And I think that might also include a site visit, that there's potential is expressed.
I'd like to do that. We did that with Roth East.
Yeah.
I think it'd be worth doing that again.
Yeah, so we'll coordinate, we'll do that in the good weather, so we'll do that probably in September, early October, schedule all out there.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
Well, under other thoughts and questions, I just wanted to bring up a question, since mitigation costs has been more of a question with SWAC this time around, and wanting to kind of put a finer point on it. Just want to point out again, kind of how this recommendation is kind of ambiguous. And there's, after this was issued, there was much discussion with the team on what, it's kind of a philosophical discussion perhaps. What is the meaning of robust? And so if the SWAC wants to put a finer point on mitigation estimates, which I heard in the last meeting, just wanted to bring up the question, if the SWAC would like to clarify this recommendation or reconsider it in some way. not trying to whittle down, you know, the expectation on mitigation, but some clarity would be helpful as we try to put estimates together and come up with mitigation strategies. So maybe just a discussion point or something to think on.
Maybe one idea is that you could equal what mitigation was done on Roth East. Do the same for Horse Ridge, so it's at the same level of mitigation efforts that you went through for site analysis. Which is an idea.
In my mind, robust means something more than a minimum. Something more than the cheapest we can go. We want to be out there. I spent 30 years down here. A big part of my life was trying to be the best neighbor I could be. And we spent money doing that. And I think that's going to be important out there, even though you're not going to have close neighbors. So, you know, it's not like we've got an open checkbook and we're going to spend every penny we can, you know, but it's something more than the minimum, I guess, is the best way I can put it.
And I actually think that's a good point, Keith, in, you know, bringing this level of evaluation of Horse Ridge up to what we did at Roth. And then that gives you an opportunity to take a look at it and determine, well, what do you want to see as robust in the case with Horse Ridge or with Roth, whichever one you decide at that point. Because this, and you recall, this conversation really came about at the end of evaluation of the two sites of Roth East and Moon Pit, and then you came into this conversation. And so we can do that evaluation now. That will give you the information on which to base that on.
And I think part of it is, you know, during this next period is to meet with interested parties, the stakeholder groups that we've identified or have self-identified, and discuss with them what are some of the things what are the concerns, what would they like to see if this were to move forward. There may be some groups that will say we don't want under any circumstance see this move forward. So we'll bring that back, but also what would mitigate, you know, meaningful mitigation look like to those groups.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that would be the best approach to me, because, I agree, like, robust, in the spirit of being a good neighbor, which I agree with the intent, is that it's like, let's do more than the bare minimum, but that is gonna be different depending on each site.
Yeah.
So I agree that I think the most helpful information for us would be, as part of that deeper analysis, to collect that information. I was gonna recommend the same thing from those stakeholders. Start getting their ideas on like what are ways that we could sort of mitigate against the, you know, the negative impacts these are gonna be. And then perhaps when we make our final recommendation, rather than the recommendation just saying robust and comprehensive, we can use some of those insights to be more specific. So, you know, at Horse Ridge, if, you know, one of the main stakeholders is CODA, maybe they have some ideas about ways we can contribute to realigning a trail or something like that, and then we could potentially get a lot more specific with that input. So then just planning on that as part of the facilitated discussion in the spring is like, what's the recommendation, and then what's the recommendation about the kind of enhanced mitigation.
Great.
I think you can almost like robust and comprehensive to me are two different things. That's where you can robust and just leave as comprehensive. That covers a lot more. Side.
Yeah, what I recall before was that Mike Riley, you know, formerly on the committee, was the one behind this sentence. And you might want to involve him in some way again as to what exactly he had in mind.
And we do have Neil from the Environmental Center is now in that position, so we'll reach out to him as the current representative. Any other thoughts or comments?
Thanks for the input.
Yeah, so with that, I want to thank you all again for your engagement, involvement, thoughtful questions, a lot of input from everybody on this back of these last 4 meetings. We look forward to bringing the commission back to you as soon as we can. We'll be in touch around the site visit. And also want to thank all the members of the public and stakeholders who have been involved and if anybody from Dodge Road is on here, we appreciate your patience with the process. Hope that the outcome is where you all want it to be as well. So with that, I want to thank you all. Do you have a comment or?
Sorry to be out of order, but I would love to make a public comment.
Commissioner Chang.
Everyone, and I'll Chang, the Sheets County Commissioner. First off, I just want to thank all the members of the SWAC for being part of this process. It is there's a lot of information, there's a lot of options, and it's really great to have a group of thoughtful people who are thinking about all of the things to move us through this process. When the negotiations with the Moon Pit owners kind of devolved, I strongly encouraged the staff and the consulting team to set us up with options for the next go round. So I think it really is it compromises the process if this bottlenecks down to just one option, and then we're trying to negotiate that. So you know, in your work over the next few months, I would just ask that you try to explore a couple of options. I mean, if we could even go to the point of doing full-blown negotiations with multiple sellers, so that we actually get the benefit of competition. I think that could be financially very beneficial for the county. Yeah.
Appreciate the comments. And do that. Good morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This is